OpenAI has recently introduced an exciting feature, the Assistants API. Let's find out. The Assistants API was designed to help building powerful AI assistants capable of performing various text processing tasks by connecting to the OpenAI's language models. And it goes way beyond that because you can easily expand the capabilities by calling tools with the Assistants API, like code interpreter, knowledge retrieval, and function calling. So if you've never used the Assistants API before, you are in the right place. I'm going to walk you through the steps to build your first custom agent driven by AI to assist you with math questions. So what is the purpose of an assistant, an AI assistant? But first, what is an agent? An agent is a computer program that can take actions and achieve specific goals based on a given input and context, autonomously with a minimum supervision. And why we would need to build an assistant? So let's take an example. The example of a customer support chatbot that will help users navigate the pages of your website, for example. So you want to create a custom chat application within your own application, which is going to be capable of responding to user queries based on your products and services. So you can feed your assistants with training data in order to provide your customers with a tailored user experience. So the chatbot can respond accurately to user queries with information about your company. So the way it works, at a very high level, the Assistants API allows to build AI assistants within your own application by defining instructions that can leverage language models, that can enable tools, and also allow to retrieve knowledge to respond to user queries. So the Assistants API can also connect to built-in tools like code interpreter, knowledge retrieval, and function calling in order to combine the assistant's own data with the ability to make API calls to get external data. So a custom chatbot built with the Assistants API can be described as a promptless autonomous agent that can respond to user queries and execute actions based on context and a given input. And we're going to see a basic example to get started. So step one, we're going to create an assistant. Then we're going to create the thread. And so the thread includes the entire dialogue between the user and the assistant. We're going to add a message to the thread and run the thread, execute the assistant. And we're going to check the run status. So if you have already worked with the chat completion API, it works differently because we're not going to wait for an AI generated response. First, we're going to check the status until it is completed, to then retrieve the messages and display the messages. So that's going to be actually step 6 and final step. We're going to retrieve and display the entire messages from the thread. So what you need in order to follow along, so obviously you're going to need a code editor. You're going to need to install the OpenAI Python library, and you need to set up an API key to be able to make API calls. And I provide with the gist with the entire source code, but we're going to go through all the steps together. So let's begin. So right here, you've got the starter file, and we're going to follow the steps from the documentation. Here you have a definition of all the objects that are used in order to create an assistance API. So first we create the assistance, then we create a thread, then we're going to add a message to the thread. So that's going to be either a user or an assistance message. Then we're going to run the thread, execute the assistance. Then we're going to check for the run status. And then after that, when it is completed, we can then display all the messages from the thread, this one. So step 1 will be to create an assistant, and you're going to specify instructions and then connect to a language model. So this one hasn't been working. And maybe for you at the time that you watch, it can be a different model. So you just need to keep an eye on the list of existing and up-to-date models. So I'll be using this one for the next example. The tools, if you'd like to connect to built-in tools provided by OpenAI, and functions. So this is another tool that we can use also in order to make API calls and add the capacity to combine with external data, which is very powerful. So the first thing is that we create here a new assistant, and make sure that you select the Python library. And before going any further, so I haven't showed you all the instructions, but in order for you to get started, so obviously you need to follow all the steps, the instructions that you're going to find on the README files. So in order to create a virtual environment, optional, so this is highly recommended. Then install the packages. So obviously what you need is OpenAI, the latest version at the time of recording. We use also python.env. This is to load environment variables because we need to also set up an API key to authorize API calls. So first we want to create a new assistant, then create a thread. And you see that I have defined the instructions, the tools, which is optional, and the language model. Then I'm going to change to this one because this one that we have in the example hasn't been working for me. So I'm going to change it like this. The next step will be to create a thread, and the thread represents the entire conversation between the user and the assistant. So I'm going to copy this line and add it step 2. Next, we're going to add a message, a new message to the thread. So basically for this, what I'm going to do is to allow to have a user input. So I'm going to create that right here. So that's going to be with input. Here we go. And we're just going to read you, something like this. And let me take here, add a message to the thread. You see that this is going to be step 3. Let's copy that and we're going to add right here. And I'm going to replace, instead of just reading the default message right here, I'm going to allow to accept, so whatever we type in the command line interface. All right, so it's going to take the thread ID because we're going to add this new message to the thread that we have just created. Next, we want to run the assistant. So that's going to be step 4. Let me find it like right here. So step 4, we want to then allow the assistants to respond to the user message. So we need to run the thread and execute the assistants. All right. So I'm going to take this and we're going to need to specify the thread ID and the assistant's ID. And for the instructions, we're going to use the exact same ones like this. All right. The next step will be to check the run status because I'm going to explain you the process actually. So as soon as you add a new message, it's going to enter a queue. So that's going to goes into the queued state and you're going to need to wait for the status to be completed before you can actually retrieve the entire list of messages of the thread. So in order to check that, I'm going to copy and I'm going to explain to you the process. You see that I've specified here until it is completed because you have different status. So we're going to check those one status. Here we go. So as soon as you have a new message that enters the queue, so you're going to have different status like either in progress or canceling. So you want this to be in progress, then to go to completed, the status completed. Okay, so what we're going to do is to print the status. And because we need to keep checking, so let's go back to the documentation because here it's going to explain that we need to keep checking for the status to change to what we need, which is completed. So it can goes to progress in progress. So it's going to keep being in the state of progress before it goes to completed. So that's why you need to keep checking it. So we're going to run this within a loop. So I'm going to change this and allow this to run until it becomes completed. And we're going to print the current status. And I'm going to actually write, and that's going to be actually this syntax, run status like this. All right, so we're going to be able to check the run status, and it's only if the run status is completed. So I'm going to break, so get out of the loop. Oh, my mistake. I should have put that right here. So first, this, we're going to run the status. That's going to be step 4, and then step 5. So when we run the assistant, and then so here we're going to run the assistant, and then we're going to check the status like this. So let's put that in the right order. And after that, we're going to be able to then, so only if this is completed, we're going to be able to get the entire messages. And you'll see that back here, I put, actually I didn't put it, but I'm going to create here an empty array. And after this is completed, so if this is completed, we're going to retrieve the list of messages, and that's going to be here, step 6. Let me copy that. And we're going to make a loop, so let me put the break right below because like this. We're going to get the list of messages, and I'm going to make sure that I only get messages only with the role assistance. So that's going to be messages. I'm going to return only the messages, if role assistance, because I don't want to print all the messages because I'm going to print already the message. So whatever you add as a user input, it's going to be printed in the command line interface. So I'm not going to display it twice. So after that, we are ready to display the messages. So I'm going to do for message in messages, and I'm going to print that maybe in green color, and that's going to be message content. And actually, this is going to be content and then text value. So if you check out, so whichever response, so I don't need to put this way. So this is just color, so extra color that I'm using. I'm using Colorama, this library Colorama, to add some color. And so that's going to be this, like this. Right, so this is the right syntax. So now let's make a quick demonstration. And of course, before, so what you need to do is to make sure that you have activated your virtual environment, installed the packages. An important step is to set up an API key. If you haven't done it yet, you need to go back to your account and then create a new one to set up your API key. And finally, we'll be ready to start the app. So I'm going to do that with this command. There we go. So that's going to prompt us to write a query. I'm going to ask a basic math questions like what is 2 and 2? And you see that we had to wait for the run status to be completed in order to retrieve and then print the message. So the last message from the assistant. So this is the way we did it right here. And for the next question, you see that it's going to go to the next step, which is we're going to run this actually in a while loop. You see right here. And you're going to get the entire source code in a gist I'm going to provide to you. So I'm going to ask another math questions like this one. I need to solve this equation. Here we go. So we've got the answer back from the assistant. And after that, you've got the options you see to type X to exit the chat conversation. So it's going to say goodbye, and that's going to be the end of this basic example. Goodbye.